Today I'll be reacting to a video by Ben Bonk named My Game Had 100 Bugs. Ben Bonk is creating a game called Slime Keep, and I've been following their series about it for a while now.
Hey, what's up guys, it's Ben Bonk, and welcome back to the 31st Slime Keep devlog. In this devlog, I fixed a ton of bugs that infested Slime Keep. Also, if you're new here, Slime Keep is a fast-paced roguelike where you must kill and capture slimes to stop the corruption that has infected your land.
Fixing bugs is one of my favorite pastimes, so I'll be trying to guess the bugs as Ben Bonk explains them. I'll probably be wrong a lot, and I might think an issue is more simple than it actually is, but I think it's fun regardless.
So after reading a ton of bug reports from the playtesters, I gathered this massive list of bugs for me to fix, as well as just small gameplay tweaks or fixes. So I started going down this list and first realized that I forgot to fully finish the death screen from the last devlog, specifically these stats on the left.
Yes, the classic setting up UI and then forgetting to actually implement the functionality. I've certainly done this a few times myself. I feel like this happens more often on death screens because if you're the developer of a game, you usually don't see the death screen that often, and if you do, you usually skip through it faster to get back to whatever you were testing. And that obviously makes it easier to forget to fully implement it.
It was pretty straightforward to set all this stuff up, so I did that, and now you can see the day that you died on, your Slimeball account, and your time played. But moving on to bugs, a really big issue was the quick travel slime puddles that would spawn on top of and inside of walls. It turns out I just forgot to destroy them from the previous day, which would mess things up. So I just made this loop to fix that, but I wasn't done quite yet.
One mistake I do embarrassingly often is forgetting to delete the game object instead of the component. I should note that using find object of type like this is kinda slow because it runs through the entire hierarchy every time, though it's not really an issue because I assume Ben Bonk only does this at the end of a day. Though personally I would still prefer having a reference to every slime teleporter and everything I want to delete, so that if I ever want to not delete something in the future, I can just not have it in that list. And one last thing, since true wasn't fast to find objects of type all, it won't find disabled game objects or components, which means if any of the slime teleporters get disabled for whatever reason, they will not get deleted and will just stay there forever. But they're disabled, so they won't really do anything either.
I made it so that if the player uses a puddle that is not in the hub area, it'll automatically teleport them to the hub area. I think this just makes sense, as now the puddle feels a lot more quick and satisfying to use, and I think a decently high percentage of the time, the player will use a puddle to return home. And if not, they can always use the puddle at home to teleport where they want.
I think that sounds like a good change, and I think their logic is correct, but it's always possible to look at people play the game and then analyze how they are actually using the puddles, if you aren't sure. It's obviously also possible to have metrics in the game and automatically send to some servers whenever people use the puddle, and then use that to analyze how people use them and how frequent they go back to home and then just move out immediately, but I think that's a bit overkill.
Next up, there's a glitch where the player couldn't purchase items from the shopkeeper, so I just fixed that up.
Wild guess time. I do not have enough footage to base this guess on, but I'm just gonna guess that it's something about buying an item and then staying inside the buy range.
But moving on, I figured that if I was about to fix a bunch of bugs, it would make sense to make a debug menu to make this process easier. I tried making one in the past, but I didn't really like it that much, so I ended up with this new one, with a bunch of options to help playtesting and bug fixing.
Since I do most of my testing in the editor and don't really have any external testers, I usually make my debug cheats, as I usually call them, by making an editor script actually, and just having a drop down in the editor menu that does stuff like skipping a stage, giving me infinite health, killing something, and so on and so on. Having debug options like this is super useful and makes it so much faster to test games and testing features.
Next, there was a bug where the player couldn't exit the computer once opening it, due to them still being able to move while the computer was open.
I wonder if the closing of the computer was tied to the location, just like opening is, meaning that if you moved away from it, you would still have to go close again to close it. Though obviously the best solution is to not let the player move while using the computer, I think it's probably good to have a close method inside the computer itself too.
So I added the ability for health to drop and massively increased the chances for items to drop after clearing a room.
This is something BenBonk most likely will need to balance sometimes in the future to find out the exact right amount of drops per room and so on. But also it can be used for difficulty options. I wouldn't recommend adding it to the game straight away, but later I would at least recommend looking into it so more people can enjoy the game at their own pace.
Moving on, I got some feedback that you need to be wishlisting Slimekeep on Steam right now because it helps you with promoting the game when I release Slimekeep. Link is in the description.
Wishlists are a perfect example of why you should make metrics a goal. I think for pre-release games, a lot of wishlists are just there to help the game grow, rather than to be alerted when the game comes or because you might want to buy it later. Which of course makes it not as useful for a game developer who wants to know, okay, how well will my game do? I think having wishlists was a lot more important before, because then you would actually stand out and get more recognition on Steam. But since everyone is just telling people to wishlist their games, it just has to get over a threshold now, and that is basically the minimum to get at least some recognition. You won't really get that huge recognition from wishlists anymore, I think. I don't actually have numbers on this. Either way, you should definitely wishlist Slimekeep on Steam, and I will certainly do it myself just to support BenBonk.
But for real, I got some feedback that was frustrating when places like Slimazon would sell super expensive weapons on the first few days of the game. So to fix this, I created a simple system that only sells certain weapons on the first few days of the game, and after a few days, the shop will sell any weapon, just making things feel a bit more realistic.
Sometimes it can be good to have some expensive stuff in the store, just to show what you can build up towards. But again, that's something you would need to get more player feedback on, and usually won't really matter that much.
Next up, there were a ton of issues with the player dying. Their health could go negative, the player could spin around for some reason.
First one obviously just didn't clamp to 0. Second could be some kind of animation being interrupted maybe, or possibly the player getting pushed around or the rotation not being locked anymore now that you can't move. It's a shame I can't figure out if my guesses are correct or not, because as it stands, there's not really any use of me guessing. I do find it fun, but I really would like to learn from my guesses.
And the death screen wouldn't always go fully down.
If I saw a bug like this, I would guess that it's either a resolution issue. It's also possible that it just goes up and down by a certain time, and then didn't make sure to clamp and therefore got more and more offset, but I don't think it would have that much offset if that was the case.
There were also some issues with capturing slimes, such as the player being able to switch weapons in the middle of a capture, really messing things up.
Stuff like this is a good reason to have state machines for the character actually. If you have states clearly in mind, then you can easily either stop what the player was doing or prevent the player from switching weapon while being in the capturing state. Especially if you make sure everything for the capturing is done from within the state and cancelled from within the state.
Another issue with the capture gun was how the player could take damage from a slime's attack while that slime was being captured. So I just made the player not be able to take damage while capturing, which is not an ideal fix, but it got the job done for now.
Here again is a good reason to use state machines, because you could just literally tell the slime that it's being captured and that it's not allowed to shoot, and if it's not being captured again, it would automatically gain back the ability to shoot. Though a possibly more elegant solution would be having a shield on the capture gun that just stops the bullets coming from the direction of the slime.
If you have a game that you've wanted to make for a while now, consider checking out Yahaha. Link is in the description if you're interested. And for the last capture gun bug, sometimes when the player dashes right after capturing a slime, it puts him in a weird movement state.
I'm gonna be once again shilling state machines, though I don't think it would be good to implement them into Slimekeep this late. I think it's definitely something people should consider or test out when making a new game. As for why the bug happened, I'm gonna assume that dashing and capturing touches the same variables. More specifically, I think that when you capture, you set a variable, when you dash, you add to some variable, when you end the capture, you overwrite that change from the dash, and when you end the dash, you at some point subtract it without setting it back to the original. Just a guess again.
I noticed that the slime pit would disappear completely when entering the keep area.
I'm guessing the slime just wasn't persistent, which, I mean, usually is an easy fix. Either just spawn the slime in whenever you change scene like that, or just have it be persistent and teleport it to the player when you change location.
So I just made him teleport to the player when they enter this corridor area. And speaking of the slime pet, occasionally there's this issue where the slime pet wouldn't move at all, which was just really odd.
I'm gonna guess that's the null reference exception or something. Something got deleted and the reference didn't get updated, possibly?
After a bit of digging, I realized that this issue came because the pathfinding graph wouldn't always be big enough, so with some minor tweaks, I think I sealed this one up.
Oh, that's an interesting one. And that just shows how far off I've probably been on every single guess so far. I haven't used A-star pathfinding myself, honestly. There was one project I almost used it, but I just barely set it up. I kinda assumed it would just be baked, but I guess I'll have to look out for this if I ever use it in the future. Nice.
Onto the spearman slime, his spear wouldn't always do damage to the player, so I just fixed that up also.
Yeah, I have no idea on this one. If I were to debug this, I would probably put a breakpoint in the collision check and just go through it with the debugger. And if it never debugged, I would probably check that I used the right method and possibly also use the physics debugger to make sure the collision actually happened.
Now for the final and biggest slime change, we had to talk about this guy, the square slime. This slime is an absolute mess, and my group of playtesters found so many bugs caused by this guy that I don't even know where to start. Sometimes
Wow, that's a lot of exceptions. I wonder if they're related to all the issues.
he'd die and then reappear, or charge at you and go into the void. The list just goes on. As much as I like the square slime, I figured that the time it would take to fix this guy up would be substantially longer than it would take me to make a new slime for the game. So I opted to say goodbye to our beloved square slime and got to work on a new slime.
Now I know I said it was probably a bit too late in development to add a state machine to Slime Keep, but I do think it would be interesting to see Ben Bonk try to use the state machine to implement this enemy. It's obviously completely possible that Ben Bonk mentioned using a state machine in the previous video and I just completely forgot, but these kind of issues does kinda seem like coroutines issues. Personally, I prefer update instead, and these kind of issues can happen in update too, but it does remind me of issues I see a lot when using coroutines.
But moving on, I now wanted to fix an issue that was kind of annoying where the player would sometimes enter a room and immediately take damage from a slime near the entrance.
I've seen a lot of games with this issue. I think easiest fix is probably just using the same logic as for walls and just not letting slime spawn near the entrance, and possibly also having a slight idle time before they start moving.
So to fix this, I just give the player around half a second of invincibility once entering a room, which was a pretty simple fix.
Or just do that. There's plenty of correct ways to do game design. There's no one golden way of doing everything.
But to switch things up a bit for these last few issues, now let's go through a rapid fire list of bug fixes and changes.
And I guess I'll just rapid fire vaguely guess what caused them and be completely wrong. Yay!
A bunch of rooms on the minimap were really messed up, so I fixed that.
Scaling issue, or possibly some of the tiles having the wrong graphic?
There's this issue where sometimes the player would enter a room and the fog would not trigger, so I fixed that.
Janky colliders or stuff happening in the wrong order?
There were a bunch of issues with this rocket launcher, where the rocket would explode when touching enemies, and the explosion itself was pretty messed up.
Possible wrong layer mask, maybe moving too fast and having a too low solver iteration count, and possibly the explosion collider being the wrong size at the wrong time, or activating multiple times when it changes size? No idea. Or possibly not being the correct shape, or the shape causing issues with the engine.
Sometimes buying weapons from the shopkeeper was a bit buggy and would take a few clicks to actually purchase, so I fixed that.
I couldn't spot if this was done through the UI or through a key press. If it's a key press, then possibly using get input in fixed update. If it's UI, hard to say honestly. Unity's UI can be very buggy and very annoying to deal with, so I don't have any good guesses.
And for the final bug fix / tweak of this video, I fixed some issues with the slime pin to make slimes not mess up layer-wise. And with that bug fixed, we're done for now.
I didn't really understand this bug, not gonna lie, so I don't have any guesses.
I definitely didn't fix every bug in the game, and I know that for a fact after sharing this updated build to my group of playtesters who once again found even more bugs. But whatever, I'll get to fixing those at some point later on. So yeah, that's all I have for now. I know this might have been a bit of a repetitive video with all the bug fixes, so sorry about that, but that's just part of game development. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Yep, that's just GameDev for you. Sometimes there's also bugs that you simply just can't reproduce or is very specific to the user's system. And sometimes you know a fix, but implementing it isn't worth because the bug happens so rarely and the fix is very large. Or if you do the fix, it would break something else and there's no way to get around that. Best bugs, of course, are the ones that you can keep in just so people can play around with them, because not all bugs are bad. And I guess that's all for my video too. I did cut out a lot of this video since I tried to mainly focus on the bugs and didn't really want to keep in anything I didn't have anything to say about. Make sure to check out BenBonk, make sure to check out BenBonk's sponsor, and make sure to wishlist Slime Keep on Steam. Bye bye!